Today, in Compassion in Action, we have somebody that I think is absolutely amazing. His name is John Oberg, and he is an animal advocate, an influencer, a social media professional, and guru, I would say, through his strategic use of these platforms, all social media platforms, and I think a brilliant use as well. His animal advocacy has been seen over 1 billion times. Sometimes I don't think we realize what 1 billion is, but that's 1,000 million. That's a lot. Anyway, John, we are so delighted to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
Elaine, thanks for having me. Victoria, thank you for inviting me. And it's a real honor to be here with such magical people, everybody on this call. And, it's a really honor to follow Swami. That was really beautiful to hear his loving story and origin story. So it's great to be here with all of you.
John, can you tell us a bit about your history, how and why you started caring about animal issues?
Yeah, the reason I started caring about animal issues was really my mom. My mom was the person who instilled a love and compassion and respect for animals in me. It was many years before I took that love and compassion and I applied it to my food choices, however. But I grew up an animal lover. My mom and I, we would TNR cats, and we would rehome animals. We would protest deer hunts. We would do many different things. And so my mom really taught me that animals are vulnerable and we impact animals all the time with our choices. And we therefore should really try and do everything we can to make the world a better, kinder place. And so I began my love for animals when I was young, started in activism with my mom. But it wasn't until I was about 20 years old that I actually made the choice to go vegan. And that was when things kind of came full circle.
Is that when you started really active animal advocacy as well?
Yeah. So when I was, it's a long story, and so I will keep it very short. But in essence, I was in Finland in 2008, and I was traveling around, and I met this guy, and he was we became friends, and we were talking about different things, and he was talking about activism, and I decided to tell him that I want to be an activist. He asked me what kind of activist I want to be, and I said I want to be an animal activist. And he said, if you want to be an animal activist, the first thing you got to do is stop eating animals. And I had never made that connection between loving and having respect and compassion for animals, and then implementing that into my, what I did 3 times a day, which is what I choose to eat. And so that was kind of the last straw in terms of the different ways in which I was influenced to stop eating animals. And so I went vegan shortly after that. And I watched a film called Earthlings. If raise your hand if you've watched Earthlings, anybody here? Yeah, very powerful film. And so it was, really, really eye-opening. Up until that point, I thought that animals lived decent lives with one bad day, and I realized, wow, these farm animals are living lives of misery from birth to death, essentially. And not only that, it wasn't just animals who were raised for meat, it was animals raised for eggs, for milk, and so on. And so I decided to become vegan and become an activist. So I started getting involved with activism in 2009 when I was living in Arizona at the time.
So that activism, you're here today, I think, because we're all applauding your success in social media, something that so many of us struggle with. How and when did you start that, and how quick did that grow?
Yeah, good question, Elaine. So what I did was I started in 2009. I started volunteering, doing all kinds of different sorts of animal rights things. We would do food giveaways. We would do big demonstrations. We would be showing people videos. I'd be handing out leaflets, so many different things. And what I quickly realized was what spoke to me the most was leafletting. I actually really enjoyed handing out leaflets, and these leaflets talked talked about how animals are being treated on factory farms and promoting vegan eating and inspiring compassion in people. And after volunteering for that a few years, I graduated college. And then so I had the opportunity to be hired by a group called Vegan Outreach. And they actually hired me to travel around North America to hand out leaflets. So I handed out hundreds of thousands of leaflets at colleges all across North America. And I loved it. Most activists don't like leafletting. For some weird reason, I actually really enjoyed it. And, it felt really powerful to get these leaflets into people's hands and then to make, it inspired people to take animal issues more seriously. And what that led to was a lot of travel. But then my mom got sick. So my mom she was diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer. And this was in 2013. And so I was devastated. She was my best friend. And I didn't know what to do, but I decided to quit my job to take care of her. And so I took essentially a long-term hiatus from Vegan Outreach, even though it was my dream job and I loved it. I knew I had to be there for my mom. And so I decided to take care of her, and they had given her 6 to 9 months to live. But she far outlasted those expectations, which was great. And in that time, while I was taking care of her, obviously I couldn't travel, but the opportunity arose to take over the social media for Vegan Outreach. And I reluctantly said yes. I didn't want to do it, but my boss at the time, John Camp, he said, I think you'd be really good at it. And it's something you can do without having to travel. And I decided, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so I started running these social media pages for Vegan Outreach at my mom's bedside, basically. I would be sitting there in a comfortable chair with my legs up on her bed, and she'd be sitting there in bed, and we'd be watching television together. I might have my laptop out and I'd be posting to Facebook or something to the Vegan Outreach page. And what I quickly realized, Elaine, is that in one day of successful outreach on Facebook and other social media platforms, I could reach more people than I could in, honestly, a lifetime of handing out leaflets. And I realized this is an incredibly powerful tool for the animals. And I have always gone where I think is most effective. And while I've, of course, loved handing out leaflets, like I said earlier, I realized that social media was where it was. That was where I could really make a big difference for animals. So I started doing social media professionally. So I ran the social media for Vegan Outreach for 2 years, left VO, joined a group called the Humane League, ran and oversaw their social media for 3 years. And then about 4.5 years ago, I left the Humane League to launch my own independent advocacy. And that's what I've been doing now. I focus mainly on my own social media accounts to basically get as many views as possible of really, really hard-hitting content. And so I post a pretty wide variety of content, but much of it could be boiled down to happy or sad content. And that happy content is often animals in sanctuaries, which, Victoria and others are going to be so lucky to see soon at Farm Sanctuary. And then some of that is really hard-hitting footage from undercover investigators who've done the hard work of going undercover and getting footage of the ways in which animals are being abused. And so that is where I focus my energy these days, is on social media.
So that brings us to our last question. And I'm glad to hear that you use a mix of happy and sad, because I think it's a big question for all of us. How to be most effective when we post in our own social media. Do you have any tips for that?
Absolutely. So I have a few tips. So for one, this might seem counterintuitive, but don't overdo it. If you are posting about animal issues all day and night, people are going to tune you out. It might work for a day or two, but your friends and family and even some strangers, they don't want to see you posting nonstop about it, because then you come across as far different than them. And also you just flooding their stream, their social media accounts with oftentimes things they don't want to see. So I think it's important to kind of pick and choose, have outside interests as well. Talk about, your experience with theology, your experience with, spirituality. Talk about your experience with things that have nothing to do with veganism or animal rights or anything. Your hobbies that you do on the weekends, your day job. Talk about other things as well, and then sprinkle in the animal content. And then when you are sprinkling in the animal content, what I really recommend doing is providing a balance of different kinds of content, a variety. So it's not just happy stuff all the time, not just sad stuff all the time. It's a variety, so you're always keeping your audience guessing as to what's coming next. So I think it's really important to try and take those things into account. And then, I think it's really important to put yourself in your audience's shoes and to meet people where they are rather than where we want them to be. So while I want everybody to be vegan, and I want everybody to go vegan immediately, I understand that most people are on their own journey. Everybody's on their own journey, really. And so we have to really do what we can to chip away at the walls that people have up that prevent them from going vegan, rather than just posting something on Facebook and expecting everybody to go vegan as soon as you hit that post button. That's not how it works. And if you have that sort of expectation, you're going to be really disappointed. So sort of lower your expectations, make them more reasonable, and then do what you can to really get as much impact as possible. And the last thing I'll say is just pay attention to what's working on social media for you and what isn't. You might find that people love when you post about vegan food, but they don't about something else. Pay attention to that and let that serve as a learning tool for you to understand how you can best utilize these social media platforms to make the biggest difference for animals that you can.
Well, John, thank you for that great advice. And also, I think one thing you've presented to us with your story of your mom, that if we do what's in front of us, we can accomplish a lot. So thank you so much. And I'm sure most of us will be following you after this. And we wish you much, much success in your good work with animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, everybody.